There are two kinds of romances. One is the whirlwind kind. Lots of passion, lots of grand gestures, lots of laughing, crying, kissing, shouting. It's an emotional roller coaster ride. And then there's the other kind. Boring, predictable, watching TV quietly, nothing overly emotional, no grand gestures of love, no grand gestures of hate either. Just small signs of intimacy built up over months and years. Trade deals are a bit similar. The ongoing trade negotiations between the US and India are of the first kind, full of drama. One day President Trump blames India in front of Prime Minister Modi, saying that India has been cheating us. Next thing we know, India and the US are working on a trade deal. While they are negotiating, US imposes 26% reciprocal tariffs on India, but then brings it down to 10% until 9 July, which then got extended to 31st July. Then says that, oh, we are just about to sign a deal. But then there's talk of 100% tariffs on countries like India, China and Brazil for buying cheap Russian oil. Now, once we cross the new deadline of 31st July, who knows what's going to happen? Will the deadline get extended again? Will India continue to get taxed at 10%, which is the current state? Or will it jump back to the reciprocal tariff rate of 26%? Or who knows, will it be even higher? On the other hand, the recently concluded trade deal with the UK is a perfect example of the second category of romance. Over 3 years of patient negotiations, some 14 rounds of talks, 29 chapters ultimately hammered out, no deadline, no dilutions, no dramatics. Now, arguably the trade deal with the US matters more to us in India because US is the most important customer of Indian goods and across a lot of the sectors accounts for the largest share of exports. But that said, the trade deal with the UK reveals some important clues on what India exactly wants out of its trade deals, what it is ready to offer, what it wants to get in return, and what is just not up for debate, which then should give us some idea on how the trade deal with the US can possibly shape up. Hello and welcome to The Bond Economist, your one-stop destination for professional advice on the economy. My name is Arudeep Nandi, and today we talk of what to make of the India-UK trade deal and what it tells us about India's negotiating position. As always, if you like this kind of content, please subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to support me, feel free to scan this QR code or use the Super Thanks button below. First things first, how has India negotiated its trade deal with the UK? Well, a few key themes emerge out of the India-UK negotiations. First, the real prize that the government seems to be eyeing for is easier access to foreign markets for labor-intensive industries, typically those that involve micro, small and medium enterprises like textiles, leather, gems and jewellery, toys, sports goods, auto components, etc. So, where India believes that it can outshine other Asian competitors is low-tech industries that typically have to rely on more labour. In the case of the trade deal with the UK, these items used to face import duties of 4 to 18%, which will now be duty-free. Although it's worth noting that a big chunk of existing goods exported to the UK was already duty-free. So it's not like the UK has lost out much. Also, UK is not known for its low-cost manufacturing in these sectors. Rather, the tariff concessions to India give it a competitive advantage or a level playing field with other Asian low-cost manufacturing hotspots around India that also cater to the British market. 2. Visas are not really a priority for this government. I know a lot of song and dance has been made on allowing short-term visas for professionals, and yes, it is a big deal that Indian professionals staying in the UK temporarily don't have to pay for social security contributions there, broadly their equivalent of our Provident Fund deductions, which makes sense because, well, they aren't there permanently. But apart from that, UK hasn't really bent its visa laws and regulations for us. It's just made it easier for short-term visits. And India seems to be okay with that, which highlights that A, India appreciates that immigration is a really touchy issue in the West, and B, doesn't quite see the point in losing valuable negotiating space in trying to ensure that the brightest Indians go abroad. So visas aren't really top priority for the Indian side. 3. India's agri sector remains off bounds. India has firmly excluded items like dairy, edible oils, apples from UK imports. Even as it has secured duty-free access into the UK for Indian food items like pulses, spices, marine products like shrimp and tuna, and processed foods. In fact, a Commerce Ministry official is quoted to have said that some processed food products that used to face duties up to 70% earlier will now enjoy 0% duty. So actually for farmers, this works out pretty well. Their own domestic markets are protected and new ones have opened up in the UK, which of course is a premium market and hence is more lucrative. But what are the major things that we have ceded to the UK in return for all of this? Well, there are three major offers that India has for the West. One, access to rich Indians. I think the government has figured out that the top of the consumer pyramid is driving much of the consumption growth. There is a rising aspirational upper middle and rich class, which is hungry for more luxury. And as we've talked about on this channel in the past, be it luxury cars, be it luxury malls, be it luxury apartments, it's this segment that has seen stellar demand in post-pandemic times. And Western companies are not known for low-cost manufacturing. They are instead known for high-end, expensive, premium and luxury products. And in many cases, Indian companies will struggle to compete with them even if they are protected with tariffs. For instance, an Indian luxury brand will struggle to give the likes of LV or Gucci a run for their money. So the government is like, sure, no problem. Sell your whiskey, sell your gin, sell your chocolates, sell your biscuits, sell your cheese, your salmon to those who can afford it in India. That is our big offer to you. But that said, India is also stepping out of its comfort zone. India is finally opening up its auto sector. See, for so long, India's policy was that let's charge over 100% tariffs on imported cars. This will not only protect domestic car firms, but will also force foreign companies to open factories in India to assemble and, if we are lucky, manufacture the cars in India. That in turn will help create an auto ecosystem in the country, with other vehicles and auto component manufacturers benefiting from this influx of new investment in technology. But now government's policy seems to be slowly shifting lanes. India seems to be okay to slowly reduce import duties on foreign cars. Now granted, it's a very gradual change for now. In the UK-India FTA, for the first year, only 20,000 cars will be allowed with lower tariff rates between 30 to 50% from over 100% currently. And eventually within 5 years, this tariff goes down to 10% for 37,000 cars entering India. A similar system is also in place for premium EVs. Now, this is known as quotas, that we will reduce import duties, but only for a certain amount of cars. Now, you may say 20,000 or 30,000 cars is nothing compared to over 4 million passenger vehicles sold in India annually. But here's the thing. Other countries too will now smell the blood and come like sharks for a chunk of India's auto meat. And while all of this may be good for the Indian consumer, especially for those who are buying luxury, premium, high-end vehicles, the risk is that the domestic auto industry will be forced to contend with a new source of competition. And foreign companies settled here, say like Hyundai, Kia or Honda, might think that, hey, what's the point of me putting my factory here when I can import the same car from my factories abroad at similar costs? Of course, I'm sure the government is acutely aware of this, which probably explains the baby steps it is taking while changing the policy, careful not to trigger a flood of imported cars in India. But it is interesting to see how India's orthodoxy is changing. And this isn't the only area where India is stepping out of its comfort zone. 2 words: public procurement. This is when the government of India and public sector companies go shopping, be it cars for ministers and officials, be it software for government systems, be it infrastructure contracts, be it computers, be it laptops, be it solar panels, be it windmills. The government is an extremely big consumer of goods and services in an economy. And boring as tenders and procurement rules may sound to the layperson, some estimates peg the government of India's shopping bill at over 20% of GDP, if not higher. Just to put that in perspective, that is more than the size of the whole of India's manufacturing sector, which is around 14% of GDP. So this is a big, juicy part of the economy that so far the government has kept out of bounds for other countries. Why? Because if government agencies, departments, and companies are forced to buy from Indian companies, it will mean more businesses, particularly for micro, small, and medium enterprises. And in turn, this will help Make in India. So, how do you decide what is an Indian company in these situations? Well, there are class 1 suppliers, those who can certify that 50% or more content is made or sourced locally. These will be given first preferences usually. Then there are class 2 suppliers where the local content is only between 20 to 50%, who are next in the pecking order. And under this trade deal, UK companies will be granted the status of class 2 suppliers, which means that as long as they manage to get only 20% of their sourcing done from Indian companies, they can now compete for large government contracts, albeit only for central government and some central public sector companies. By the way, the deal with the UK also makes it easier for Indian firms to participate in UK government's procurement. So there is some degree of quid pro quo happening here. But it is interesting that India is slowly opening up its public procurement sector to foreign participation. This was first done for the deal with UAE, and now it's confirmed with the UK. And like the auto sector, the risk is that a lot of other countries too will now be circling the waters saying, India, this is unfair. We too want to access your public procurement markets. Which means that eventually MSMEs in India that have so far enjoyed a secure source of customers in the Indian government will slowly have to deal with more competition from foreign firms. And by the way, this is a cautionary tale not just for manufacturing companies, but also services ones. Because India has also made it easier for British firms to enter into a number of our service sectors, including telecom, construction, financial services, accounting, auditing, among others. There's in fact even mutual recognition of degrees and qualifications on the cards. Legal, though, has been kept out. The lawyers seem to have convinced the government that no competition will be tolerated from foreign firms. But apart from these, there's also a softer side of the trade negotiations, which is also a matter of surprise. So two things stand out. One, India has agreed to go woke. So the trade deal with the UK has clauses around gender equality, development, anti-corruption, labour rights, things that India has never cared to put in its trade deals before. And second, India has agreed to tighten the language around the protection of patents. So one of the many insecurities that developed countries have in dealing with developing countries like India is, how can we protect our proprietary tech and know-how, things that we have invested in using expensive research and development? How can we be sure that when our products reach your country, they don't get copied or reverse engineered? Now, patents exist to prevent exactly this. That is, for a period of time, by law, anyone who tries to copy your product, your technology can be prosecuted. But where there are laws, there are loopholes. Especially Indian pharma companies have really used these loopholes to make cheaper versions of expensive drugs in the West, making India literally the pharmacy of the world. For instance, Indian patent law prevents global pharma companies to keep evergreening or extending the duration of their patents by making small tweaks to the formula. India's laws also allow for the government and courts to allow domestic producers to manufacture patented drugs without consent of the patent holder, typically in cases of public health emergencies or unaffordable pricing, something known as compulsory licensing. Now, in the trade deal with the UK, there is language to suggest that the preference will not be for compulsory licensing, but for voluntary licensing, where the parent company will get a lot more compensation and a lot more say in the production of the copied drug, which essentially means more power to UK pharma companies and possibly higher costs of those medicines in India as a result. So, what does the UK-India trade deal tell us about the key priorities for India in trade negotiations? Well, one, we need market access for labor-intensive industries and our food products. Two, we are really keen to protect the agricultural sector. The farmer lobby is too important for the government to irritate. 3, visas are not really a priority for India. 4, 5, and 6 offer foreign firms access to high-end Indian consumers, to the auto sector, and to the behemoth public procurement economy. 7, India is kind of relaxed about foreign firms entering into its services sector. 8, India is okay to be more savvy by Western standards, which means agreeing to developmental clauses, which means agreeing to intellectual property commitments that earlier we would ignore or it would be too taboo for us to talk about. So what does all of this mean for the trade deal with the US? Well, keep watching this space, and for more such insights, like, share, and subscribe to The Bond Economist.